On today's SheerLuxe in Conversation with podcast, I am joined by the one and only Sir Ben Ainslie and his wife, Georgie. They are a serious powerhouse couple. He's a four-time Olympic gold medalist, the most successful sailor in history. And with the next 3 golds?
Yeah, the next 4 were gold. Yep.
The next 4.
Yep.
Sorry. Silver,
sorry,
don't
deny me.
Sorry. We're here to chat, working together.
I ended up reporting on that for my show. Wow. So my team sent me to San Francisco to report on the comeback of comebacks. But of course, at that point, we were kind of 6 months into our relationship.
Family life, business life, what life is like when you got to win 4 gold medals.
Anyone who is in a relationship with a professional sports person, there is a mutual understanding that you're both on that journey together.
Yeah, they are pretty awesome. Stay tuned. Hello, I'm Georgie Coleridge Cole, SheerLuxe's founder and CEO, and welcome to today's In Conversation with podcast. I'm joined today by a serious powerhouse of a couple, Georgie and, well, Lady Georgie and Sir Ben Ainslie.
I didn't do much to earn that. I just married him.
Smart girls marry accountants. That's what they say. That's what I was told. They have combined careers across sport, business and innovation. Georgie is an entrepreneur, a sports broadcaster, well known for her time at Sky Sports with Olivia Wayne, our SheerLuxe host. Yep. She's also host of the Performance People podcast, where she delves into the secrets of elite success with leading figures from sport and wellness. I highly recommend you give it a listen. She's also vice chair of the 1851 Trust, inspiring children to pursue STEM careers through the power of sport. I am so behind you on that. Ben, meanwhile, her sidekick, is the most decorated Olympic sailor in history. I'm pretty blown away by 4 gold medals and a silver. Can't win them all.
Yeah.
Can't win
Sadly.
them all. He's also an America's Cup winner and the driving force behind the Athena Sports Group, which includes the Athena Racing British America's Cup team, the Emirates Great Britain SailGP team, and more. They are working together more closely than ever. They have created a brand called Ainslie and Ainslie. It's really interesting. I need it in my life. I think we probably all do. I know it's aimed at sort of elite.
It's aimed at you too.
Okay.
You are elite in your own way.
No gold medals in my industry. But anyway, there's lots to cover.
Yeah.
And firstly, well, I was at university with your sister. This is a small world.
There should be some good stories out of this, Georgie.
I don't think either of them can remember anything that happened in that period of time.
I know, God. It was quite a while ago. Ben, there's you. I mean, my husband would like to be the one sitting here, if I'm really honest. He's like, you're meeting
or
my
just down the pub with you.
You're meeting my
we can arrange
hero. Are you a
we
golfer?
can arrange
a
a pint or two. I'd be lying
Yes,
if
I
I said
have
I was a golfer. I mean, I play golf terribly.
Oh, really?
I really enjoy it. I just wish I was good at it.
Most people like you are really annoying and they take it up in 2 years. I met a footballer the other day. He'd been playing for 3 years and he was already playing off 4.
I mean, that's what I heard about Andy Murray. Like the minute the tennis ended, it was all about the golf. Within seconds, he was, into some serious single figures.
I know.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of a potted history of your career? As I said, lots of people recognise you from Sky Sports. But yeah, can you run us through it?
I regularly lie and say this was only 10 years ago that this happened. But way back when, many moons ago, my career started actually as a runner at GMTV. So way back when GMB was GMTV. And yeah, I started doing night shifts as a runner, making lots of tea, shopping for lots of props for the segments in the show the next morning. And obviously reaching complete exhaustion in the hours I needed to be super switched on for, which was between sort of 6 a.m. and 9:30 when the show was on air. But I had done a shift that started at 8 p.m. prior. So by that time, I was absolutely on the floor. But, that was kind of great training for everything that came. It was a real baptism of fire, but at the same time, you couldn't get enough of that live experience. It was just so buzzy. Like anyone who's been in a live newsroom or that environment knows that it's just this electric atmosphere as the pips go and you know that you're going onto air. Had a chance opportunity to go to the Cannes Film Festival in 2000 and put together a showreel. And, one of those interviews was a total disaster. I turned up, what had happened is the producer and the assistant producer stormed off set and left halfway through this particular production we were doing. So I was left with myself and my makeup artist, who happened to be my best friend, actually quite a famous makeup artist these days, Georgina Graham. And so George and I found ourselves at the Cannes Film Festival in 2000 with her operating a camera and me interviewing Jamie Bell, who at the time had just done a movie called Dancer. And I think it was Dancer in the Dark initially, and then it became Dancer. But, you know, this is the guy that is Billy Elliot. And so it was a big deal. But we recorded the entire interview with the lens cap on the camera.
Oh, shit.
Which was like rude awakening as to how things should or shouldn't go. But at the same time, it was like one of the most fun times, you know, just immersing yourself in that world and seeing what it was all about. But I got a real kind of love for how to present, how to tell a story. You know, when we talk about those moments that shape us or shape our world moving forward, like, you know, just throwing yourself in at the deep end in that situation kind of made sense of everything afterwards. And then getting the first gig on Sky when, you know, I remember sitting in my boss's office at Sky Sports News, and he sort of said, well, what do you know about football? Oh, crikey, this is going to be tricky, because I do have I have a love for Formula One, I have a love for tennis, I have a love for a lot of other sports, but I wasn't up to speed on football. And Sky Sports at the time was, you know, predominantly football. So I said, give me a moment, let me go away and show you that I can do this. So I did, the 92 league clubs in the country, and I walked back in his office a few weeks later and he said, where did Burnley play? And I was like, Turf Moor. It's like, you've got the job.
Oh, but then
where
I had that from.
But then you only ever really learn when you're in the hot seat.
Yeah,
and we spent, you know, those shifts back in the day on Sky Sports News, like back in the early 2000s, we were on air for 6-hour shifts.
And it was sort of
live.
you, Kirsty.
Yeah.
Olivia. I mean, it was
a great
amazing
girl
how
gang.
all these women, like truly, and I'm not a sports nut, although I have 5 brothers and I love Formula One. Side note, I sort of slightly feel like Ben feels a bit like Verstappen felt at the ceremony they had to launch this season.
What, like, i.e. he doesn't want to be here?
Did you see, what's the comedian called?
Jack Whitehall.
Jack, thank you. Did you see Jack Whitehall going around ripping the shit out of everyone? It was brilliant. Anyway, there was a great line about Verstappen being so thrilled and could he do things, you know, more in the public eye.
You are very
bit
much
harsh.
No, but you're very much like, I always think,
We did just
this
make him
about
do his
Ben.
outfit. He's like,
yeah,
is this
you did.
for real?
Yeah,
But
that was harsh.
I don't know. I mean, you can obviously speak for yourself here, but at the same time, it's sort of, we were designing the base in Portsmouth for the first ever America's Cup Challenge, and I'd taken on the role of doing that with zero budget. And so we put up lots of decals everywhere to sort of, you know, give the impact of what we were trying to achieve. One of the decals that we put on Ben's door was "Let the racket do the talking," which is John McEnroe's quote from way back. And that's kind of how that's how I see you. It's very much like, let me go and do it on the water, let me show it. And that's your sort of best way, isn't it, of delivery?
Well, I guess historically, hopefully things have developed somewhat since then. That was what was that? It was 12 years ago now.
I mean, the proof's slightly in the pudding, isn't it? Ben, as I said, my husband would rather be sitting here. We haven't said, this is a SheerLuxe podcast, which means I'm afraid, you know, I did one the other day on crypto. We still talked about what everyone's wearing. Can you tell us what you're wearing today?
So I am actually wearing one of Sienna Miller's collection, M&S collection, white suits. It's really nice and light and easy to wear.
It looks fab. Ben, we've done this to you once already. I'm going to do it again.
I'm wearing.
You know now.
I'm wearing a blue suit.
Where is it from?
It's from Ralph Lauren.
Yes.
Yeah. And
your shirt?
And the shirt, we discovered that's from Brioni or Brioni.
Yes, Brioni. Yeah.
We can pronounce that correctly now.
And the shoes, I
The
could have told
shoes
you
are
were churches.
Good old churches.
Of course.
Can't go wrong.
Of course.
Yeah.
Tell me about your love of fashion. Does it always run deep?
Yes,
Yeah,
tell
it's
us about
wonderful.
your love of fashion.
No, we won't. Tell us about the early years. Look, I mean, your success is just off the charts. Talk a bit more about your career, but can you tell us what got you there? Are you from a family of sailors? I mean,
Yeah, so I actually bizarrely grew up about as far away from the sea as you can get in Cheshire. And my parents were really keen sailors. They used to traipse off to North Wales at weekends and sail in little wooden clinker built cruising boats called a folk boat. Anyone's into sailing would know what a folk boat is, but very small. You can just about camp out overnight on these things.
Oof.
And there was a group of them that used to go, and they imagine how glamorous this is. They used to go cruising off over the Irish Sea and get as far as sort of Dunleary and places like that.
Doesn't that sound amazing?
No.
have a boozy weekend and then sail back across the Irish Sea to North Wales. So that was their thing. And then there was a gale blowing or something. They'd drunk far too many pints of Guinness in the yacht club in North Wales and saw an advert for the very first crewed race around the world. And this is back in 1973. Sponsored by Whitbread Brewery, of course. And they decided to sign up for this race, given the furthest they'd ever sailed was across the Irish Sea and back. And there was a group of them that did it. They went away, chartered a boat to take part in this race. They were smart enough to realise that none of them could really navigate, so they hired a navigator out of the Royal Navy, and they went off and did this race.
How many of them were there?
I think there were about 12 of them on the crew. It's a 70-foot boat, and my mum was supposed to go. My parents didn't think they could have kids, as it happened at the time. And amazingly, about 3 months before the start of the race, my mum realised she was pregnant with my elder sister, Fleur. And so she stayed behind, had Fleur. Dad went off and had this amazing adventure, sailed around the world with his mates.
And his parrot.
And the parrot, Monty. So that was where the sailing part came from, really.
So were you sailing from a small boy?
With my family, but just sort of messing around in boats. And then it was pretty pivotal in this whole thing. At the age of I would have been about 8 or 9, we upped sticks and moved to Cornwall. And
whereabouts?
In Val Estuary, which anyone who's been down there, it's just one of the most beautiful spots on earth. I think, slightly biased, of course, but it's just beautiful down there. And so growing up on the water's edge was that was the opportunity to really get into sailing big time.
Did you start racing as a child?
So I was about 10. I started racing locally, started doing okay. The problem of being down in Cornwall, trying to get up to do competitions in the rest of the UK was really hard.
When you say you were doing okay, are you being really humble here? Were you winning? Were you that good?
No, I'm being maybe a little bit humble. I was winning for my age group, and I started racing nationally and started winning for my age group nationally, so I realised I was pretty good. But the first international event too, I was quite young. I qualified for a world championship, but given this is a junior class of boat, but I was only 11 years old. And
how old were your competitors?
They were between 11 and 15, so some of them were 14, 15. So I travelled with the rest of the team to Japan. Raced in Yokohama, which is near Tokyo.
The team being what? The British junior team?
Yeah,
I mean,
top
you're talking
5.
to someone who married a sailor and is
so
not.
this is top 5 in the country.
A little bit biased.
And there's only really one class of boat for junior sailors. It's called an optimist, or kids. So I was sort of top 5 in the country, which meant I qualified to go to World Championships. But I mean, just incredible to go to such a different culture.
So was Japan the first place you went?
Yeah,
internationally.
first international event, and I was, I think, 69th or something like that. So yeah, I was good, but I wasn't that good to your point.
No.
But I loved.
Sorry.
No,
It's not
turns out
good.
it weren't.
It's
No,
not
not that
how you
good.
were racing.
Yeah, and so it developed from there, and went through the junior ranks. The boat that I started sailing as I was a teenager, coming out of the optimist class, became an Olympic class just as I stepped into it. So it meant then I had this sort of pathway to trying to have a crack at the Olympic Games, and that was really my drive and my motivation then to try and get to the Olympic Games, which I did. I was 18. I qualified for the 96 Olympics, which was Atlanta. The sailing for Atlanta Olympics was in Savannah in Georgia. And so off I went. My mum and dad came with me. We rented a small house in Savannah for 6 months. My sister came, and it was just an amazing experience to relocate to a city like that, and again, a totally different culture. And to race in the Olympic Games at 19 was a real eye-opener.
And that year
That was the silver medal.
was the silver.
In that particular race in 96, actually, it was ended up neck and neck with myself and a Brazilian, very famous Brazilian sailor with a fantastic name of Robert Scheidt. And
Who wasn't, in fact.
he was certainly not.
Really
He's an amazing sailor. I took the silver medal, and I remember being absolutely devastated because I wasn't sure if I'd ever get the chance to race in the Olympics again. And that sounds stupid now, given what happened. Because you only get one rep per nation in the Olympics.
Is that right?
in the class of boat that you sail. And in Britain, we've got a lot of fantastic sailors. We have had a lot of fantastic sailors. So you're never really sure if you're going to get the nod again.
And were the next 3 golds?
Yeah, the next 4 were gold. Yep.
The next 4. Sorry. Silver.
Sorry,
4
don't
golds.
deny me.
Sorry. Gosh. So 4 golds consecutively. Of those 4, which was the hairiest, which was the tightest?
I think the brilliant thing about sport that's taught me, and then, talking about going into business with either the teams or with Georgie, and just as we all go through life, there's so much that you can learn from sport that's transferable to everyday life and to business. And the thing is, to answer your question, of those 4 gold medals, 2 of them were, pardon the pun, plain sailing, but things were going well, and I ended up, having quite a commanding lead, and it was all relatively straightforward. But 2 were absolute, shit fights.
Really?
Went to the wire.
Bitter end.
Absolutely went to the wire, and it could easily have gone the other way. And I think what that teaches you is that you're always going to have challenges, and you never quite know how something's going to play out. But you've just got to keep at it and keep going.
Yeah.
And if you get a setback, you got to come back from that.
Why are you so good at sailing?
I guess having grown up with it, so having sort of an innate feel for being on the water, and I mean, sailing is it's a little bit like chess, really. I mean, you're in these boats and they're incredibly fast now, and they're doing 100 kilometers an hour plus, but it's all about reading the water, reading the competition, and so having that, the very best sailors have that innate feel for the water and the wind, and they can read the wind on the water, and that's very, very important. But then, like in any other sport or walk of life, it's about the commitment, isn't it? It's about, working super hard, trying to outwork the opposition. And, I'd like to think all through my career, I've always had that instilled in me, that, that work ethic, and nothing's going to come for free.
And have you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers?
No.
So there's this amazing sort of chapter in there, but fundamentally the whole book is about how these people become extraordinary. And it is about, as Ben said, the commitment, the talent, but also coincidence. It's about the opportunity. They talk about, like, Bill Gates was born in a particular town where computers were first put into his school. So he had probably 2 years on everyone else to really learn what that was all about. And just about the fact that, a lot of American football stars or NHL stars, the birth date cutoff is January for that system. So, you'll find most extraordinary talented American sports stars, the ones that, predominantly have thrived, are at a particular time in the year.
Born in December.
That's when they're born, because you're just bigger, you're stronger, you've got that sort of confidence.
Yeah. My children.
Both of ours July.
21st of December. Due 3rd of January, August. I mean, fucking disaster.
No, that's not a complete disaster. We're July on both Fox and Bellatrix, so we're right at the end of the school year for both of them. So they're both the youngest, effectively, for their year. But, it is what it is.
Sod it. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
It'll come out
in the grand scheme. It just doesn't matter. At what point did you two meet, and how?
In 2012, I guess, before your London Games. Yeah, we were at a corporate dinner, and we were both there, I think, supporting a mutual friend, and on this table together. And we weren't even actually sat next to each other, were we?
You were very late though. You made a particular entrance.
Late entrance. Yeah. And anyway, so somewhere around sort of between main course and puddings, there was a moment where this mutual friend of ours dragged Ben up onto the stage to chat about his sailing world and his life and career to date. And I could have switched off, but I didn't. I engaged in the conversation. And we actually had this weird sort of moment, didn't we? Which was sort of, we caught each other's eye in the middle of this. It was a bit like that, in the middle of this sort of explanation, but nothing really happened. There was nothing sort of from that sort of came as the relationship wasn't born out of that evening necessarily. It was sort of sometime later where we both found ourselves in, completely different circumstances, but we were both in America at the same time. I'd been doing Sky Sports News, which was a flagship sports news 24-hour show for basically 10 years. And then Sky signed the Formula One rights, and I have always loved Formula One. So the first opportunity to work on that, I jumped at it. One of the things that was so attractive about that is that suddenly I was out of the studio and traveling on this crazy traveling circus, doing the Formula One tour effectively, which is such a great place to be. It's so much fun.
Oh my God, I can only imagine.
The best people who are dedicated to what they do at the absolute top elite level. But it took me to a place where I knew I didn't want to do that lifestyle forever. It was
Yeah.
relentless.
Yeah.
I was getting to that point in my life where I was like, Christ, if I carry on doing this, I'm never going to stop. I'm going to be forever in this world.
Yeah, yeah.
And it'll hold me because it's so exciting professionally.
Yeah.
But personally, I'm not sure what that would look like. I'd made quite a big call, which was to knock it on the head after sort of only about a year and a half of it, and had a great sort of season, and then got a gig to go and work at Fox Sports in America, in New York, and host a panel show out there on American sport with a chap called Regis Philbin, who at the time was like, he was like, I guess, if we're looking at sort of popular people in our world like that, he was like a Bruce Forsyth type guy. He was like the ultimate entertainment host. He was brilliant at it. But I had to be his traffic cop, because as you went into each and every break, he'd be running over on the, you had to hit the timings. He was not doing that because he had a story to tell. And he was so interesting and so compelling and so watchable and lovable that you wanted to dive into any Regis story at any moment in time.
But we've
you
got some
couldn't.
ads to serve.
You had some ads.
Right now.
You had to get to the ads. So I was the person that had to go, Reg, let's talk about this after the break. But it meant that I was based in New York. And so as a result of that, Ben and I obviously had met, and then we had this sort of trans-American romance where I was in New York, he was in San Francisco with the Cup team, and every weekend we would find a way to either go that way or that way. And then in 2013, this crazy Cup happened. I ended up reporting on that for my show. So my team sent me to San Francisco to report on the comeback of comebacks. But of course, at that point, we were kind of 6 months into our relationship. So, I mean, Reg loved it, didn't he? He was like, Sir Ben, what's happening today, Sir Ben? He'd just love it.
He was one of the most charismatic people you could ever meet, wasn't he? He was
I need to
really
look him
brilliant.
up.
He was fabulous.
I need to look him up. American Bruce Forsyth, right?
But and I suppose what that gave us, though, as a couple, was the opportunity to sort of, out of any sort of spotlight or interest, was actually to kind of see if this thing that we had any kind of legs to it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as a result of Ben winning that cup, all the phone calls came to sort of start this America's Cup team, but based in Britain.
America's Cup dovetailed into the second half of my Olympic career. So I got involved the first time was in 2000, after the Sydney Olympics, so just after 2000. I got involved with an American team. Then after that with the Kiwis. So there's some irony in that, given that it was the Kiwis that were racing in the finals last summer. So I spent 3 years based down in Auckland, learned a huge amount sailing with the Kiwis, who are amazing sailors and have amazing history in the America's Cup.
I can't remember what the Netflix film in the America's Cup.
Yeah,
Race of the Century.
Race of the Century.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Love a sports docu.
It's good. It's a really good one. It's just been an amazing journey, incredible journey. And then 2013, I got involved with Larry Ellison's team, Oracle Team USA. And we had this amazing comeback. We were 8-1 down in the first to win 9 series. And we managed to come back and win it 9-8 again against the Kiwis. So Kiwis come up quite regularly in
They're pretty nifty
in the sailing world, and they're like I said, they've got an incredible legacy in the sport and certainly in the America's Cup. But that's really what sort of spearheaded the opportunity to get a British team going in the America's Cup, because this 9-8 comeback was pretty massive for the sport, and that got a lot of attention back home and enabled me to really go out and get the financing together to start a British team.
And it was kind of a seminal moment for both of us, effectively at the same time, to go, are we going to do this thing together? Are we also going to start this cup team? And are we going to kind of like set up shop back home? So,
And are we going to get married?
we did. We kind of, it was weird, wasn't it? We did sort of have quite
You weren't at that
a
stage.
shorthand by that point.
Yeah, I
of
think
where
it
we
was
were
pretty
going.
clear, though, coming together, setting up base back home. It was, there was pretty clear the direction of travel.
We did that
And then
thing
we
where
got-
you get a dog.
That's
before
such
a
a
dog.
male thing, isn't it?
I know.
Everything
Everything has to be in play.
I'm just building up.
I know. Why
Well,
do they
you
feel
know,
the
you
need to
Don't
do
push me
that?
when I'm
Yeah.
I know. And we got the dog.
expectations,
We
it's
got the
terrible.
dog before the children.
So
it was all of that.
genius.
Yeah.
So you got married in.
2014, December 2014. You can't even remember.
Where did you propose?
At home, it was Georgie's birthday. I sort of went to a reasonable amount of effort.
You
I
did,
think.
you did, yeah.
It was quite special.
Did you have a ring?
Yes.
Did she send it back?
No, I
No,
think she's happy
still
with
wearing it, still on, still
Yeah.
firmly in play.
Although I did.
Well done. That's another life win. There's quite a good percentage on the amount of rings that are returned.
Is there?
But it was quite funny because I had met through one of the teams. At the time, he was the CEO of Garrard's. And so I thought, well, he's got to be a good contact to go and see if I can sort of blag a sort of discount on an engagement ring.
Did you get one? Did you get one?
No, I didn't get a discount.
No, I don't imagine.
And the other thing he said to me was, I said, "Oh, look, I've met this really lovely girl, and I'm thinking of proposing." He said, "Don't do that. I've been married twice. It's a complete waste of time."
Says the man who sells engagement rings for a living.
So,
Dear, oh dear.
No, he's a charmer. We saw him.
no,
recently,
he's a
didn't we?
lovely,
We had a
he's a
good
lovely,
giggle about
really,
it.
really lovely guy. But yeah, it was funny.
So you came back to set up this team, British team for the America's Cup. For those listening who don't know what the America's Cup is, it is one of the oldest races. I am so out of my depth here, but I've watched the docu. I know
Your husband
the
knows
UK.
all about it.
It's
I
an
know.
enigma of an event. It's an insane sporting
it's
event.
It's phenomenal, the history. Like, it's pretty freaking cool. I get that. And it's got a real heritage to it, hasn't it? And
Yeah, it's an outlier of a sporting event because back to this point about, there's so much predictability in other areas of sport in terms of what you expect from the Football League, what you expect from, I don't know, rugby competitions or whatever that might be. But the Cup is just an absolute beast of its own, and it runs to its complete own tune. So I liken it to a Lord of the Rings scenario where everyone's desperate to get hold of this ring because it's so precious in their world. And it absolutely is. Like, the old mug is like the oldest sporting trophy, dates back to 1851 and Queen Victoria's time. And
1851?
yeah, and we've never won it. And we're a British
I said to my husband,
sailing
I asked
nation
him
and
that
we've never
question,
won
he
it.
said, I've never won it.
No, and so but like
Come
Ben
on,
alluded
Ben.
to, but he alluded to before, like the Kiwis have been able to put together consistent teams that breeds. It's such a team sport, isn't it? It's all about the culture of a team. It's all about harnessing that and then just iterating to the point where you're competitive.
It's a design race, really. It's a design race that's finished off by a sailing race. So
What does that mean? It's a design race?
well, it's a technology
Tech.
sport competition. So as Georgie says, it's about the continuity. So with that, you then can develop your design tools and obviously in the modern world
Improve
of
all the
design
time.
tools, a huge amount of computational input into that. And how can you keep iterating each campaign? And that's where the Kiwis in particular have done a great job. They've been going, I think, 35 years in the America's Cup now.
Watch this film on the America's Cup on Netflix. It's amazing. I mean, the Kiwis are trying to hide their boat at night, aren't they? To stop.
There's espionage laced throughout all of it.
It's fascinating. And it's a massive business, and the money that changed. I think people don't really understand quite
I
how
think there's
significant
probably
this
more
is.
billionaires in sailing than there is in any other sport. And the Cup is the absolute pinnacle of sailing. And every billionaire in sailing wants to win the Cup.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got this massive mesh of serious people in business and enterprise and who love sport, who want to basically battle with each other for the privilege of this trophy, which then if you win it, by the way, you get to rewrite all the rules. So you get to change everything.
But that's the history of the America's Cup, and that's sort of part of why it is so special. But the future of the America's Cup, I think a lot of people think actually it's about trying to make something that is more sustainable financially. And to Georgie's point, the winner doesn't just rewrite the rules every time they win it.
Because that's how it has been.
You actually need a structure whereby there's continuity. You know
bit more
that the event
democratic.
is every 2 years. There's sort of some cost-cutting measures in there, like we've seen in Formula One. There's neutral management, governance of the thing, and that's what we're talking about, trying to take the America's Cup in that direction.
It's got to be more interesting that way, hasn't it? And a bit more exciting.
Well, also it's
when
about
this-
people's. If you think about where different sports people apply their trade, like you want the best sailors in the world to be consistently
To be
sailing,
able to win
actually be
as
safe,
well.
but to be competing.
But to
and
have
if
a
you don't
chance.
have that opportunity
Yeah.
if you have it every 4 years, which is currently the case with the Cup, it's like that's a real shame. Like these people that are absolutely brilliant at what they do aren't getting to actually do that.
We've just had one, or about to just have one.
Just have Barcelona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you a bit about what it's like being married. I mean, you've been married a long time, together a long time. You have 2 children. Like, how do you do that with someone who's absent quite a lot of the time?
I've got a really amazing super nanny called Kirsty
No,
who's been with us
well,
since day dot. But
That's
it's
key. But look, it feels balanced sitting here with you.
I think you have
which
to.
I don't think people would necessarily expect.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are.
There's that great story, isn't there? That does the rounds every time someone gets married, and you've got the couple and they at the wedding venue, and the vicar is there, and they say to the vicar, "Well, what's the secret to a successful marriage? And he said, well, there's this octogenarian couple over here. Let's ask them. And they go to the old man who's sitting there with his wife, and they're sitting there very happy together. He said, well, what's the secret to the success? 60 plus years of wonderful marriage. How have you made that happen? And the man said, well, it's very simple, really. 'Cause when we got married, we agreed that I would make all of the big decisions and my wife would make all of the small decisions. And I said, well, how's that worked out for you then? He said, well, it's gone okay because so far we haven't had to make any big decisions. So
Perfect.
This is how it
more
works.
Questions.
Yeah.
Back to your original point about, I guess, the balance of something and making something work, which has high stakes attached to it, at least to one of the partners. I think there are sacrifices everywhere, but I guess the better word to use there is choices. So you go into that, don't you, knowing we were very much eyes wide open going, and I know I'm marrying a competitive sportsman. I know that that's the mindset. I know that's the way that that's going to go. And there are going to be certain sort of decisions along the way which are going to have to be considered as a result of that sort of thinking. But at the same time, I also know that Ben, just like me, wants to build this sort of family environment, and we want to have our own family, and we want to succeed as that as well as at work. So what does that look like? So like every household, you have really testing times and you have some really tricky conversations, and something always has to give on one side or the other. But we've kind of navigated, I think, that quite well, haven't we? There have been a few slam doors, but... But by and large,
I've got 4 gold medals.
we have sort of navigated, I think, that quite well, considering that there have been moments which are, quite fundamental that change the complexion of the world in which you live. I mean, definitely me sort of stepping back from work to accommodate this British team dream and also our family dream is case in point. But then again, later, however many years later, when I said to Ben, I really want to start this performance brand, which links into the team, actually, you were all very supportive of that, because that means that, professionally as well as personally, I'm going to feel satisfied. I'm going to be empowered. I'll be an easier person to live with at home.
I fully believe happy wife, happy life, and it's a cliche and it's simple, but I think,
and it works both ways.
Credit to your husband that in the high profile competitive role which requires full focus, etc. You have also, 2 children to raise, and I know that hasn't been easy. And you also have your own career. You have your own very successful podcast. Tell us about that a little bit.
This was a funny old thing, because when we first started the brand, we were first talking about what we wanted to create.
Or podcast?
Well, the overarching feeling is that we know a shed load of stuff that is in Ben's world about elite sport. We've been in and around it for such a long time now. There are learnings and there is understanding and there's knowledge in there that actually people like me, sitting slightly on the edge of it, outside of it, but living also pretty driven, full-on lives, can benefit from massively. And so how about we extrapolate that and take that and actually find a way of actually creating a business around that, because it feels like there is a lot to share on that front, which could do other people as well as me a bit of good. And how that all started came out of COVID in sort of 2020, 2021. We were having to decamp the entire sailing team to New Zealand during that time. And, for everyone else, they were locked down and it was horrific. We were lucky enough to still go to New Zealand on a mission to try and win the cup.
When you say we, this is you leading a British team for the America's Cup. Right?
A couple hundred people in the team.
And their families.
And your family, because where they go, you go. What's your involvement in the Americas, other than supporting your husband, so that your family?
I think again, anyone who is in a relationship with a professional sports person, there is a mutual understanding that you're both on that journey together. Because you can't not be. You have to be all in. Otherwise, very quickly, those cracks will appear and it will all fall down. So you have to be, both of you, absolutely aligned on your direction of travel.
And that's just such good life advice as well. And I can see why, particularly when you're absent for so long, that is a big consideration for you.
We do, but I think everyone,
for success in relationships, you have to be aligned. But
like everybody, sometimes you're able to take that take that on the road. And we were able to do that in COVID with the New Zealand campaign. And then at other times, Barcelona, the most recent campaign, we couldn't do that. Bellatrix is in school and we have to navigate that situation more wisely and more carefully. And it is, again, a compromise. But you have to sort of find a way through that because that's what you signed up for. Yeah. And that's part of the deal. So when we were in New Zealand and it was during COVID, I said to Ben, I'd had 8 rounds of IVF. I was absolutely flattened by the process. As you can tell,
Bellatrix?
We'd had Bellatrix, yep. So we had hers. Exactly. We've got a little one to think about and all of that.
Did she come easily and then the IVF?
No, she was the first round of IVF. We had 30 or so eggs and she was the one goodie. That was great. And we were able to obviously have her. And that was amazing. But I guess lulled us into a bit of a false sense of security as to what the rest of that would look like later, which we probably weren't as prepared for as we could have been or should have been. But subsequently, we ended up in a situation where in New Zealand, having had all this IVF and having a little one and everything else, I just knew that I wasn't going into my 40s as strong and robust as I had always been before. And I had no idea when I walked into like a Revital or a Holland and Barrett where I should be looking for help because there wasn't a particular problem. It was just I didn't feel 100% as I'd always hoped I would.
Firing all cylinders.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't waking up in the morning and zinging and thinking, how can I take on the world today? Which has been to date kind of the way that I've always approached life. As Ben well knows. So in New Zealand, we had time, I guess, to sort of explore stuff. And there was one conversation we had where Ben was like, why don't you just talk to the sailing? Why don't you talk to our human performance team that we have, this elite sports team within the elite sports team that are helping the athletes with their nutrition, their psychology, their fitness, their training, everything that you'd imagine makes them great.
And that's
is
a team
in
of
this group
200.
of people.
Slightly less than that last time for New Zealand. I mean, there was slightly less than 200, but around about 150 people. And like Georgie says, their families are on the road as well.
Gosh,
so we were there for
everyone
8 months, 10
needs
months.
to support everybody else. And
it's huge, isn't it?
It's a real mission, but it is like a family. It's a really extraordinary experience that you all go through together. So you're very much on it together.
It's a real lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's extraordinary because all the kids have grown up together.
Yeah.
So in Bermuda, Bellatrix was like 4 months old and ended that campaign 13 months old. Yeah. And all of those kids are now sort of 8-9 years old, whatever. And they've all
bonded
sort of grown
for life.
through.
So you tapped in
I tapped into what they were doing.
Team who were supporting, nurturing, looking after, getting the best out of these elite sportsmen
and women, because we've got an Athena pathway program which supports the female sailors coming through. But exactly that, basically tapped into that and went, can I have what he's having and what they're having? Because
what were you having?
They are able to perform.
We can now, right?
At this level. I want some of that. And so after a lot of soul searching, a lot of interrogation into ingredients and formulations and just lots of back and forth and graft behind the scenes to kind of get there, we came up with these 2 formulations, night powder and day powder.
Before you elaborate on those, can I ask you, I had Dom Daly and George Cruz in not that long ago, talking about products that they've launched, but and I was fascinated in their training programs and again the teams that support them, and I think we sort of underestimate
what that looks like.
I remember watching something with Murray, I think, and the team, one man and the circus that goes along with. What are you being given? And okay, it's been now formulated into products that we can all benefit from, which is amazing. But is it that prescriptive when you're out there training? Is it nutritionally? Is it fitness-wise? Is that
it's
is it
a bit
a
of
program
everything
that's really strictly followed and laid out for you by experts?
Yeah, I mean, at that level of sport that we're at with the America's Cup and any other sport at that level, you mentioned Andy Murray, but it's very individually tailored to the athlete, even within in a team sport. So each athlete will have their bloods monitored, so they know exactly what they're potentially missing in terms of nutrients and support. Yeah. And so the diet and the supplements are tailored around that. And then, of course, when they're out competing, whether on the water, in our case, in sailing, then they have the right support as well in terms of hydration and
ask,
energy.
Is that approach, we're in a real sort of supplement era now, right? We're sort of understanding the importance of gut health and going back to your early days, because what you say makes total sense. When in 96, was that 96 your first Olympics?
Yeah,
He was
right.
only 19 then, though.
Okay,
remember?
but was that part of the mix then as well, or is this newer?
Yes, but a million miles away from where it is now in
Right.
terms of the technology and the
Yeah.
way it's developed. the
data tracking.
Yeah.
And the
So it
innovation
was,
and the-
I think about some of the stuff.
But even then, you were being tested for what your body needed and stuff.
yes, but
given
to Georgie's point, nowhere near the technology was nowhere
Right.
near what it is now. So the
Right.
understanding and just the way that the supplements have improved, and,
Right.
and it's incredible. But having the opportunity with this to with this particular product to say, well, look, this is what an athlete would take, and this is how an athlete would approach, in our case, with sleep powder, trying to improve their sleep and their quality of sleep, but then making that relatable to the everyday person, which is what we've done with
okay,
Ainslie.
I am all ears.
I think that's a really good point, that the common thought is that how on earth could we as like mere mortals take or need what an elite athlete is taking or needing, because the way that they're putting their body through various figures for performance and everything else, how could that possibly align with me? Actually, just to debunk that a little bit, we all have universal needs.
Yeah,
and actually the routine and the consistency that an athlete has is actually so even and so level compared to what we put ourselves through, the daily stresses and strains of actually unpredictability. So being thrown a curveball and having to react to it, spinning lots of plates, juggling lots of balls, that's the reality of our worlds. And that's not as easy to plan for as it is if you're an elite athlete who knows their routine and their structure. So there's a real argument that actually we're much more closely aligned to the sort of stresses and strains
and in need
than you think.
and less trained to deal with. I mean, Chris Hemsworth, this is a bit of becoming a bit of a...
It's a
I mean,
theme.
even
It's a
you
theme.
know it's a thing, and you've only been here an hour.
We knew it was a thing after 2 minutes.
Okay, but the cortisol impact, and actually the professional training of an athlete means you can deal with that with less impact on the body, right? So perhaps we're an even more.
And I think the other thing is that the athlete understands so much better than the rest of us what that all looks like, because they've been doing it for a really long time. And actually, the other point to that is that we're at a place in our lives like this midlife where there are other things that start to come into play as well.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
So
I
it's
banned treatments and perimenopause from dinner
all
party
conversations.
chat. I moved
Okay.
chairs at a dinner party the other day when someone started talking about them. I said, I'm really sorry, Kira. You're a very smart barrister. We are not talking about treatments.
But it was one of those things where, I mean, it is a sort of
An age and stage.
Yes, and therefore, the things that normally you'd coast through, and I mean this like, even if we took ourselves off on a really big evening and a night out, the recovery from that
Takes a
versus
bit
being a
longer.
recovery when you're sort of 25 is not insurmountable.
Yeah.
So it's the same for the rest of us, right?
Yeah.
So it's just about appreciating you're at a particular place. I went back into a training program and I hadn't been training for a while, about sort of 6-7 months ago. And I'd been really terrible with my training for a period of time. So I've got to get back in. And my version of getting back in is like throw the kitchen sink at it, which is what I did. And then I got injured. But I wouldn't have got injured, say 20 years ago, because I would have just like been able to bounce off that.
So tell me, Ainslie and Ainslie.
Yeah.
2 products that you formulated with the intel of the teams that were supporting you.
That's exactly
essentially.
right.
I've heard they're great for sleep. I'm all ears. I could do with that. The melatonin needs to go, and Ainslie and Ainslie needs to take its spot.
If you asked me to sort of do it in one sentence, I'd say it's a human performance team in your kitchen and in your bedroom. And I don't mean that in a controversial
Who came up
way.
with
I know,
that?
but that's basically what it is. We've taken that elite sport thinking from a top level elite sport team and drilled it down into what that looks like for the everyday person. And we've come up with these 2 formulations which are designed to support your circadian rhythms. So I don't know if you know about circadian rhythm much, but
Not a lot.
it's the internal body clock. It's all about light and dark and how you respond to your day. If you go way back to sort of caveman days, actually, there's really good reasons why we hunt and gather in the day and we sleep at night, and our body is programmed in that particular function. But of course, as modern life has started to erode those boundaries, we too are a little confused, as is our body clock, as to what on earth is going on. So our needs change. So we created a night powder. The two sort of like hero ingredients, I guess, in that are saffron and tart cherry. That alongside things like magnesium, which you'll know as well. If you could take all of those supplements in an individual way, of course you could. But what we've tried to do is create a formulation which pulls all of the goodness together of all of those ingredients that can help and aid your rest and recovery, and in meaningful doses as well.
And that rest and recovery piece is just so key.
You need it to be able to come back tomorrow firing, and that's exactly what I wanted. I felt like I was on the floor depleted, and I needed to bounce back. So that bounce back ability, which I think was a word coined on Soccer AM back in my day on Sky Sports, but that sort of bounce back ability is something that we're all kind of searching for, especially in, dare I say it, midlife, which is where we're at. And the day powder supports your immunity and energy, so gives you what you need in the middle of the day to make sure you're not hitting those sort of moments where you're like, oh, I'm struggling and I need a more robust.
So is it a powder? Is it a capsule?
So they are powders. They're powders designed because when we first looked at this, we looked at how we could be as convenient as possible to the consumer and how we could fit in with their lives. They're really busy. They don't need a load of piles of supplements on the countertop or whatever. They need a really easy, convenient solution. The sort of person we're going after as a customer has a very busy, hectic life where we need to basically make it as simple as possible for them. Also, how can we turn it into a nice experience? So we have a little shaker cup that we use, and you dilute 100 mils of water into the shaker cup with a scoop of night powder or day powder. Just literally shake it up.
Every
drink
day?
it, shot. That's it. Every day. Yeah.
Where can you buy it?
You can buy it online at ainslieainslie.com.
And you buy them as a set?
You can't buy day powder yet, but you can at the end of this month. So I don't know when this podcast is going out, but by sort of April, you will be able to buy both. Yeah, and you can buy them together or you can buy them individually.
Are you taking it?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm totally biased and I think it's amazing. But no, it really is quite special because it's unusual to find so much data and expertise to go into a product like this. And I know as a sports person just how many pills I've had to take previously in terms of supplements, and you get this big pill box and it's a real...
Quite intimidating as well.
It's a real thing to keep up. Whereas to have the powders, and they taste great. It's a lot of people that we speak to just enjoy that process before you go to bed at night, having getting the powder and just the taste and a nice shot before you go to sleep.
But it's not just to help you sleep well, right?
No, and actually it's really important to make that distinction because, there are health claims associated with that, and that's not where we're at. It is about aiding the rest and recovery process. Okay. And actually, as a result of that, the more likely outcome is probably that you will have a great night, or you should have a great night's sleep.
That's the quality of sleep,
the quality
as much as
sleep.
the quantity of sleep.
We can't guarantee, how can guarantee parents of young children 8 hours every night? That is just like a real pipe dream as far as I'm concerned, and in our world. But what we do need is as much recovery time as we can possibly get hold of to then come back again, like we've said, firing the next day.
I mean, the other great thing about it is that we've got these sports. We've got the America's Cup team. We have a Sail GP team, which is another great circuit in the world of sailing. The youth and women's team, and that's just a great opportunity to test these products and you can see through the wearables and the tracking, you can see the impact it's having.
Yeah, that's so true. With the Aura rings, you can see.
Yeah.
Have you done that? Have you tested it?
Yeah, and I think that's like...
Ben's like, yeah, obviously.
No, but that is true. Like, there's nowhere to kind of hide on that stuff now because there is ways and means to track, and people are so much more aware these days of actually what that looks like. So, a feeling is one thing, and then seeing as believing is another. And, you can't claim to be all things to all people, but certainly what we've tried to do is take this elite sport thinking and put it in a powder that we feel absolutely can benefit you.
And has a distinct USP in quite a cluttered market.
Really cluttered market. And I think actually we would really hope that in the future there's definitely, at the minute it's quite unregulated. It would be good to actually see some of that come in because it would help make the distinction for sure.
It's been a lot of fun. I mean, I'm really proud of Georgie and the team and what they've done with the product, because a huge amount of time and effort has gone into it, as you can imagine. But it really is a cool product that I think we're all very proud of.
Yeah, and going back to that bit that we were saying earlier about, like, you know, that sense of just well-being as you go through life about what you're doing and what you're working on. And, you know, you get to this point, I'm sort of, you know, mid-40s, and you get to that point where you're like, well, I want to work with people I really want to work with, and I want to create something really special. And I'm not going to jeopardize that time at home with kiddos to do something that I don't really want to get stuck into.
I'm really
So
believing.
it's got to really count for something, and it's got to mean something.
Yeah. And you've got to work even more with your husband.
And you do. You have to have that. Although we're quite interesting, I guess, as a working pair, because you know that thing we were talking about earlier about kind of having that alignment of fundamentals in play, and then out of that you can kind of, as long as your principle is on the same trajectory.
Okay.
I think out of that, the actual doing the do just kind of takes care of itself in a way. So I'm not going to get involved with picking Ben's sailing team lineup, but at the same time, we have discussions about the different sorts of nuances of that, and then
that I think is
vice versa.
I think that's actually the best bit about, you know, whether you work in the same company or industry or whatever. For me personally, that's a real benefit.
You've got to, you need to have a sounding board that you can say anything to at any time, and hope that it's not going to be, you know, really heavily judged. And that you can actually just sort of, you know, riff ideas off back and forth. I think we definitely do have the same sort of work ethic, the same work ethos, the same sort of approach to that. And it doesn't feel like it completely takes over, does it? Or does it?
I'm just laughing about remember one of the first branding meetings that we had.
Don't let him be in charge of anything to do with design.
And we had these two branding options. So
Georgie said, well,
okay, we've got the team, let's get the team together and see what the team think. Okay, well, let's do that. And there were four of us. This was very, very early stage. There were four of us, I think, in the team. Then finally, everybody agreed with me.
Well, creative and brand was my thing, as opposed to anything else necessarily.
That did not go down very well.
Yes, but I felt like it was skewed for the wrong reasons, Georgie.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like they were making the right decision on the right basis.
Stand firm.
Stand your ground.
I agree.
Which you did, and you are absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, you know, I often say to my husband, I'm not often wrong.
Afterwards, strangely, something found itself onto my computer screen, and I don't know who put it there, and I don't know where it came from. But the quote was, nobody ever made a statue of a committee.
And on that note, I will say you seem like the perfect team, and I wish you all the success with Ainslie and Ainslie. And truly, could you leave some behind, please? I would like to try it. I feel like I need it in my life. And if you're taking it, I can tell you my husband's going to be taking it.
Right.
Thank you
Thanks,
Thank you for having us.
very much for joining us today. That is it for today. If you enjoyed that, then do please rate, review, subscribe, follow us wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. It really does help it be found. We will be back soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.